Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today is a very special episode. We will be discussing my father's 1972 Kawasaki F7 175. This is a motorcycle he's actually owned since 1973. I grew up listening to a lot of his stories riding this motorcycle, and including a lot of the other stories of his other motorcycles and cars and experiences. I finally got to the point where I wanted to start working on this motorcycle again. I waited so long, mostly just because I was intimidated to work on things right now, especially motorcycles. I'm very new to this world, so I wanted to kind of get my feet wet before I really dove into something that was kind of more sentimental, rather than something I'll discard possibly. Like I said, this is a 1972. It's only a 175cc, but it is a two-stroke. This bike sat for over 20 years in a leaky shed. My father and a buddy of his got it running again. From what I understand, it took a little bit of work, rebuilt the carb. They had to break the clutch plates loose again. They were seized basically. And then he kept it going for quite a few years until finally Jessica, my wife, got her motorcycle license. I had just started learning to ride and I wanted something small, lightweight. I think there was something also just very special about learning to ride a motorcycle that my father rode and has owned for so long. And I mean, growing up, when we lived out in the country, I remember looking at this and it sat in a little old leaky shed, just stored in the back, covered underneath blankets and whatnot. And it was so intimidating as a child to look at it. And looking back, it's just so funny how I looked at this bike like it was a beast in the back of the garage. So owning it now, getting to learn to ride on it, I even took my motorcycle endorsement test on this motorcycle. When I finally got my father to kind of let me take it over, I ended up bobbing the rear end and I took off the fender, which I saved all of these parts because I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with them. So I have all of the original fenders, the tail light, everything I did to this bike. I actually painted the exhaust as well. It used to be black. I liked the copper tone. So I mean, I put my own little touch on it. A few years ago, I pulled it out because I'd like to, get it started running around the property a little bit. When I opened up the fuel cap, I noticed there's not just a little bit of rust. There is actual rust scale on the inside of the tank. And that's when I realized the bike just needs a lot more work than I was comfortable at doing at the time. So the bike has sat for a couple years now in my garage, and I've tried to keep it somewhat clean, but I think the time has finally come for me to give this thing the attention it deserves. This episode is very special because I managed to convince my father to sit down, retell a lot of his stories on camera to share. A lot with this motorcycle and a little more. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. It's funny, my father and I are very similar, and I honestly feel like we don't talk a whole lot, but we also don't have to talk a whole lot maybe. I don't know. But this was probably one of the longest conversations my father and I have had for a while, I think. So it's very special to me that I got to document this, and I'll always have it to look back on now because, like I said, I grew up listening to these stories, and I'm very pleased that I'm able to share them with everyone now. So without further ado, here's how that entire conversation went. I don't love this. Well, I mean, I listened to your stories
I think
growing
I'm going to
up.
say that on camera.
Well, I told you, it's kind of like you're just like retelling stories like you were a minute ago.
Yeah, but nobody wants to hear my stupid stories.
You'd be amazed because there's not a lot of stories like this coming out anymore. And I think it'd be cool to get the history of the bike, documented in a way.
I got to thinking about all my stupid stories, and it's like, yeah, I probably don't want that recorded. When I think about it.
I started recording mine, so.
Oh, did you?
Well, yeah, it's all online.
Yeah, but you don't do that much. It's as stupid as what I've done.
I don't know. I took a Sportster off-road. So.
Well, that's... Yeah, but intentionally.
The more you think about it, the worse it gets. I'm not going to have you say your full name, but what is your name?
John.
And you are my father.
Yes.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yes. Quite undeniably.
I don't know if people are going to be able to tell us apart because we both laugh the same and make the same dry jokes, but we'll see.
So you tell dad jokes and...
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I got that from you.
Yeah.
So, and this is your 1972 Kawasaki.
It is. It is. And I wasn't allowed to have pinups of girls growing up in my bedroom, but I had motorcycles. Kawasaki was when I was 18 years old and just starting my job as a draftsman, living at home with my parents. And they didn't want me to get a motorcycle because I was feeling reckless at the time. And they said, we're not doing that. So I talked one of my bosses into co-signing for me to buy the thing.
It's a pretty good boss.
Yeah. He was looking out for me. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I got that bike. Maybe $700 and some. And there's things, I don't remember anything, but I remember Harry Cycle Center. I always had a Honda pinup on my wall, these Honda trail bikes and stuff. And the reason I wanted a trail bike was because I was out walking around Mount Builders Park one day, out along the road. And you know how you hear a near accident, you hear squalling tires and stuff like that going on. And there was a guy on a Yamaha trail bike that avoided an accident, but he had an accident. He ran right into the metal fence around the park, and he hit it at about 45, and I watched it. He hit that fence, laid it down, rode that fence on about 45, and he went up and launched him up into the air. And here's this guy flying through the air on this trail bike, and he comes down in the park. And it's like, I gotta get me one of those, because you leave a scene of an accident like that in some other bike, you just got to tear out the fence. But that was magnificent. That was Evel Knievel stuff. For a young kid. Yeah. I thought, yeah, that's the route I'm going to go. Somehow I ended up at Harry's Cycle Center. And the place is still out on 79. It's like L&H or something, Seamstress or something. I don't know what it is. But they had this bike. It was new and in the crate. And I think they gave me a deal on it. I'm not sure why. They said they made me a deal on it. But you could see through the lumber, that the red and, nice, new, and it was all crated up and this wide. And that was just magical. My cousin and I actually bought the same bike at the same time, and we rent a U-Haul and haul them out in the country till you had gravel roads you could learn how to ride the thing, because you weren't legally allowed to ride it in town. So, but you had to get the bike to whoever had the trailer, because evidently he wasn't going to bring the trailer to me. But me, it wasn't that bright then, So I thought, well, what could it hurt if I ride that bike, the Kawasaki, over to my cousin's house to put it in a trailer to go out the country? Oh, what could it hurt? So 3 miles later, in Newark, in front of the post office, I get pulled over. Because I guess I looked like a newbie on a brand new little trail bike. Maybe because I was riding perfectly, right? And he said, well, I'm going to impound the bike and fine you, and because you don't have a motorcycle endorsement. And then he got a call on his radio. he got called away. He says, okay, I have to leave now. So here's the deal. You push the bike home, and if I come back around and find that you're riding it, then I'm going to pound the bike and you'll be in serious monetary trouble. So a bike I had loaded up with a full tank of gas, I had to push home.
How far was that?
3 miles. And it's just a little bike,
Right.
but leaning against you with a brand new bike that doesn't roll very well in neutral, and you're turning the chain and all that with a full tank of gas, that was quite a walk.
Yeah.
And I was trying to feel out whether I felt real lucky to ride it, and I didn't feel that lucky, so I thought I'd better push it all the way home. Back to the story of ever making it out in the country and riding on gravel roads, we decided, my cousin and me, well, let's go trail riding. I think really what you need is a trail, as opposed to trying to go riding trail bikes in the woods, because that didn't work out very well for us. So, because when we tried to trail ride in the woods, you end up hung up in the underbrush and in the woods. You know, it's like yeah, that wouldn't work out. How are we going to get out of this? So we got out of there, and then we're riding back, and so, well, that just looks like a light mud puddle. So we're going through this mud puddle, and it's like, well, this is like 6 or 8 inches deep, you know, and it's like 20 feet diameter, and he hits a rock, and he goes down. So this thing's like laying halfway down in the water, blowing bubbles and stuff, you know, the muffler's on the bottom side. And I'm going, oh, that's a hard no. I'm not, this is my baby. I'm not doing this. You know, it's just like, I think I'm more going to stick to the road, you know, rather than doing this trail crap. But when I started riding down to my parents' place at Burr Oak, I like to just take it easy down there on the curves at like 45, 48 mile an hour. And it sounded a little deeper, a little bit more mellow. And if you kept it in a happy spot, you know, it didn't sound like a bucket of bolts. Always like the people kind of wave at you and stuff. I'm thinking now maybe they were kind of blowing the blue smoke from the 2-cycle out of their face. I always thought, oh, hi. Maybe it wasn't that, you know.
Yeah.
I remember my parents would go down to vacation at Burr Oak, and I'd be at home because I had maybe had to work, and I'd maybe get lonesome, and I'd think, you know, one night I thought, I'm going to head down to Burr Oak. It's a nice night. It's warm. I love the ride down to Burr Oak. Like on the way down to Burr Oak that night, I thought, well, this is going to get cold. You know how it is down through the hills at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. It can get cold on a summer night, you know. So I put on 2 coats, and I'm riding down there, and it's a beautiful ride. It's close to it's almost a 2-hour ride in the dark at night. And I know those roads, there's straightaways, there's curves. Used to be more curves until they got rid of them and made more straightaways. But I got behind this couple that were going dead slow. You know, and granted it's a weekend, they're looking for a place to park. Here's this annoying twerp on this 2-cycle motorcycle behind them with their headlight right in his rear view mirror, and they want me to pass. I know they want me to pass them. They're looking for a place to park. And I'm thinking, and in retrospect, even though I knew the road, I was probably thinking about passing them on this straightaway longer than what I thought. And I knew that I thought, this is that straightaway. I did the Kawasaki routine, pulled out, passed. Yeah, look how fast I can go on this trail bike. And then I saw it. This isn't that straightaway. It's where the double S curve comes in. And then time slows down at that point. And I made it through the first curve. And I know it's a very tight, it almost switches back on itself and again. And the bike went down and it squalled like a car. I thought, well, that's interesting. I never heard those noises come out of this bike before. You know, really low squalling of tires on asphalt as I come around this curve. But there was enough speed and those little grippy, knobby tires, that bike came back up. It came up. There was enough force that it caught, and the bike came back up. Well, that's cool. It came up, and I'm vertical, but the curve switched back, and now it's going the other way. And I only had time to get it straight up. So there's no time to lean in. I just like shot straight off into the field. And I'm thinking, now would probably be a good time for a prayer. And I'm thinking, well, what to pray for? And I'm thinking, trees. I'm praying that there's not a tree here with my name on it. And it's like, and suddenly, like the headlight, I don't see anything. I was seeing grass and then nothing. And I'm flying. And me and the bike are flying. We're getting air here. I'm doing the flying monkey routine here for a second time in my life. And that's probably not a good thing. And I'm thinking, the bike falls out from underneath me and I'm holding on to it and I lose my grip and the bike pulls away from me. And I feel something pull back, flip my fingers back, my gloves, flip my fingers, come back underneath my arms, and I just stop midair, bam, and then we fall. And I'm thinking, what is this? And we'll fall back into this ravine. And I'm laying here thinking, okay, I figured out I hit a fence. So I thought, where am I? Because I'm in pitch black out here and I'm smelling this hot motorcycle and header and everything. And I'm laying all bunched up with and all this wire. And then here's these headlights come around from the left. And they're about 20, 30 feet below me on the road. Where it come down below me, I've come off the top of the hill and come down on the bank. And there's that couple loping along, driving slow that I passed. And then I could see where I was because as they were coming by me, they didn't see me up on the bank, some freak all tied up in a bunch of barbed wire, But I could assess where I was and what was going on. And I'd have to say that as a farm implement for helping with farm maintenance, if you want to tear out, I kind of looked at it the next day, about 60 feet of 3 loose strand barbed wire fence and 4 fence posts, it does a pretty good job, But then I got to thinking, somehow I got the bike out of the barbed wire and got it down to the road, and it started and rode on into maybe Somerset, New Lexington. It was some little town, and got where there was some train tracks, and I got underneath of a street light, surveyed damage, and it ripped out. So the second coat I had on, it ripped out the armpits where the barbed wire caught me in the air, and I got to thinking about that, And next day I got to surveying. Okay, there was about 3 or 4 strands of barbed wire. First one got caught under the front fender. Second one got cut underneath the turn signal, and it still bears the gouge, and you got the fender. But then that top strand caught me in midair under my armpits, so it's like this. And I always think, maybe sometimes there's the right time to let go. And here's this bike, and it dropped, and I had a good grip on it. I had good muscles in the forearms from hanging on this bike 70 mile an hour all the time, but somehow that bike dropped away from my grip, and that wire caught my gloves. And I'm thinking, about 2 or 3 inches difference, the barbed wire would have come across, followed my arms, and this very strong neck would have caught the weight of my entire body in midair.
Well, that's a scary thought.
And I'm thinking, who would have found me there till daylight?
Yeah.
So that could be a thing. So, yeah. Don't do the Kawasaki thing at night, even on a road you're familiar with, because maybe you're not in that section of road.
So with the Kawasaki, it basically got parked after what, 88 then, after you had your Savage?
It probably 80, 80 some, and then it was still running after you were born.
Yeah, so it probably sat in that shed for the majority of its life from about 88, late 80s, to, that was what, 2005, 2004?
We moved to Bowling Road 2002,
Okay.
so it was still running then, and then I rode it out there, and
Yep.
then for some reason I decided to rework it.
What year was that about? A couple years later? I think it was like 2004, 2005.
Well, I got to looking at the photograph of when we put it up in the back of the pickup truck,
Oh, yeah.
and I looked at, scrolled in on your license plate, and it said '05.
Yep. And that's when I helped lift it up into Uncle Doug's truck.
Yeah, somehow or other the clutch probably seized up, or on the transmission. I couldn't get it out of first, second gear. I could maybe run it up and down the driveway, and that's probably all I was able to do until they fixed that. And probably I'm thinking about that I was riding that bike because after the carburetor got fixed and brought it back, then I was able to ride it.
And then it was running all the way up until,
Maybe 2014 anyway, because I would have to look at on the digital where I had it out to Dillon Dam
yep.
there in that last one picture I
And
sent you.
Finally, you passed it down to me.
Oh, yeah. When we moved from Bowling Road, I didn't have a place for it.
Yeah.
Figured I didn't have a place for it.
And you let me play with it, which I ended up kind of tracker style, I guess is what I was going for at the time.
So, but yeah, I waited a lot of years thinking one day, I always dreamed of retracing my youthful roots of getting another motorcycle big enough to ride down, maybe a Harley, to ride down to Burr Oak, make that pilgrimage on a motorcycle down to Burr Oak again, So I wanted to do that. So finally, in 2016, pulled that trigger and found a motorcycle.
It was the same time I actually got my license. The Kawasaki is what I actually took my license endorsement test on.
Interesting issue there when I lived at home with my parents and I got my motorcycle. My dad decided he's going to go out and buy a 350 Honda. So he found one with a dented gas tank, but we went out riding a few times. It's kind of a pain to go riding with somebody, but it was kind of cool to go riding with my dad on his motorcycle. And to take his permit test, you needed something very agile and nimble. So he took my trail bike because it was perfect. You could basically wait in traffic standing the thing up, and it just tiptoe around through the course because it was pretty much set up for closer to trail then. It was very, very nimble and very, balanceable, rather than his 350 Honda. So that's interesting. So my dad took his test, so did I, and
So did
you
I.
did. So there's the history there.
Yeah, I know.
I keep everything forever.
To wrap up this final thoughts on the Kawasaki, what did you think of what I did to it when I bobbed it?
Well, I like the bob that you did on your wife's bike. Actually, too, you worked on that.
Yeah.
In fact, you kind of made her do a lot of the work, I heard. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's good. But yeah, I kind of liked the idea that the bike could maybe get a new life. I always had mixed feelings on that, whether to keep the bike the way it is, and you do too, on whether to modify it so it can kind of be used and more get a new life in a funner form, or leave it the way it was.
Yeah, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself because I want to basically address the health of the bike first, and then we'll kind of estimate how far we want to take the project. But if we can get it up into running condition, that's goal number one. So I'm not sure how long it'll take, but
Well, that should be an interesting, quite a process.
any final thoughts?
It'd be nice to have it all freshened up and shiny again, but that'll take a lot of work.
Did you ever think you'd hold on to a bike like this for how many years? 40, 50 years now?
Uh, I don't know. I could just never really give it up, you know. Even if it had to end up being a paperweight on my desk, I guess I'd probably hold on to it. But until something really rusts and breaks in half, that was kind of the tradition. Uh, I could never have some of those dream cars, so you'd buy them when they had 130 some thousand miles on them, and then you'd drive them until they were too dangerous to drive.
All right. I think that about does it. I mean, it's a good history of the Kawasaki, plus some.
I thought the neatest revelation was that really you and I and my dad had taken or gotten our motorcycle endorsement on that bike.
Yeah, that, I never knew that either. So
Like,
that's a whole new cool story to tell about the bike.
yeah, interesting. Keep something long enough, keep it running long enough. But hey, I still have the 10-speed bike that I basically got killed on in the 8th grade. So,
Well, that's a whole nother story.
yeah, that was the other time I did the flying monkey thing, you know. So,
Alrighty, well, I guess that'll be it.
okay.
All right. So I'm looking to ultimately kind of restore this bike, but I'm on the fence. So it is a very old engine. It seems to hold compression fairly well. The carb is fairly refreshed, but I'm probably going to go through that as well. Parts for this bike are not easy to come by, so a lot of it will probably be seeing if other parts will work, maybe custom making some things, or even employing some people to manufacture some new parts for me. The other idea I have is actually kind of doing a resto mod refresh. So it uses drums front and rear. Everything on the bike is very tiny. This bike right now in its physical form probably weighs 200 pounds. Once I put back on the fender, the luggage rack, and a few parts, I think the wet weight on it's like 237, 247, something like that. So I'm thinking about actually buying an entirely new front end off of probably a newer Kawasaki, keep it similar in the brand, and seeing if I can upgrade the front end to a modern front end, maybe with a disc brake. The rear end, I don't know if I can do that as much. I'll have to do some research. I believe also right now this is a 19-inch front wheel and an 18 rear. I think if I upgraded the front end, I probably would go to a 21-inch rim, maybe in the front. The bike is very short, as you can tell. Like, it's so low. It's such a tiny little bike. It's so easy to handle. It weighs nothing. It's so great. I would love to take it out, enjoy it on a few trails, but I don't want to destroy it. Let me know what you think. Should I keep it all original, which I can do. It would just be very hard to track down these parts, and almost actually as challenging as it would be to just upgrade them to newer bike components. But that's where I'm at. I'm on the fence of restore it, keep it going, or upgrade it so I can actually still enjoy it on the streets, run it around maybe some dirt roads, some trails. Like I said, it's a very light bike. It's a very enjoyable, and most of all, it's a two-stroke. It's super cool. Again, I really enjoyed sitting down and listening to my father's stories, and plus some. I mean, he's got so many other stories that I'd love to document, and I don't know if I could get him to sit down again because afterwards I think he was kind of nervous. I think that's normal for anybody trying to tell a story to a camera. But if you'd like to hear more, let me know. I'm sure he'll see the comments down below. With that said, happy Father's Day. Let me know if you guys have any advice on this bike, any suggestions, any links, anybody I should look at. I've already been watching a lot of other guys' project bikes on YouTube. I've joined Facebook pages. I'm looking to learn anything and everything and kind of look at my options. So with that said, Thank you for watching this very special and personal episode. And until next time, take it easy.